Good day, Australia. I am coming back in February with Secure the Future. I very much enjoyed my trip and meeting so many people in Australia back in late 2011. As you know, we've been warning there's a global crash coming in real estate, in stocks, in economies, and especially China. Well, I've got some new cycles that I want to share with you. One particularly what I call a secret cycle that is a better measure of a cycle we've had in the past that has been very powerful for us, that would have suggested that the crash would have come between 2010 and 12. This is a much more refined and much more measurable version of this cycle, and it says 2014 to 19 is going to be the next major downturn in the global economy, and the next crash is likely to come from early 2014 into 2015, maybe a little bit later. So I think we're getting very close now to this time period. It's going to be a very important time period to let me give you a world overview, an Australia overview of what's going to happen, because I think it's going to be the most important time in your lives to profit from a downturn. Markets go down, real estate and stocks and commodities, faster than they go up. So if you can see a major crash like this coming, and we're due after all this endless artificial stimulus to see this happen in the world. All of my cycles, long-term and intermediate, converge on 2014 and 19. I've never been more convinced that we're going to see a major crisis than now, and I think stocks are going to top in most countries around the world by early 2014, likely by mid to late January. So right about the time period I'm coming out here. Now also note, I've got a new book coming out in Australia, like I did in late 2011, called The Demographic Cliff. It shows how demographic trends are going to keep going down, and we're going to keep falling off this demographic cliff around the world. So this stimulus is not going to work. Governments are assuming if we just get over this temporary financial crisis or subprime crisis in the United States, that we'll get back to normal. No, demographics get worse ahead for Europe. They get worse ahead for China. They get worse ahead for the United States, and you are lucky in Australia. I've always said in this global crisis, and we're going to have one, I'd rather sit this out in Australia than any other civilized, especially English-speaking country in the world. Your demographics don't dip nearly as much, and anywhere near as much as most countries. And Japan started this whole cliff in the 1990s, and Japan is an example, especially to you in Australia, because you also have, your biggest problem is you have a real estate bubble that's now one of the highest in the world. Only London is more expensive, and Vancouver is similar in Canada to Sydney and Melbourne. You guys are at 10 times income. Your real estate, since I was there in late 2011, even the people who argued with me from the industry said, you know, Harry, because the demographics are right, I don't think things are going to go up hardly anymore, but they don't see it bursting. Let me tell you, bubbles always burst. I wish I could tell you that you'll be the exception, that some bubbles don't burst. I've studied every bubble known to man in the last couple hundred years. Real estate, commodity, stock, they always burst. Some burst later, some burst slower. And that's the case. You're going to be one of the last ones to go down, and you probably will not go down as much as the U.S. will at its worst. But we have more of a real estate bubble to go. So that's one thing I'm going to discuss. You've got to get real about real estate, and there's another important factor in my new book. Real estate will never be the same. I look at, with smaller generations following the massive baby boom in most countries, and the least so in Australia, but still the case, we're going to get to the point in coming decades where there's going to be more and more buyers who are sellers of real estate versus younger households who buy primarily between age 27 and 41 in most countries. So real estate is never going to appreciate like it did before. So we got to be in real estate to rent it out and make positive cash flow, or to live in it and improve it, but not for speculation and investment anymore. The other big problem you have in Australia, why you're going to feel this downturn more than the last one, you guys sailed through. Because your demographics were not as bad, because you didn't have a subprime crisis and the crazy bank lending that we saw in places like the United States and Spain and now in China. But China is the big problem for you. You export a lot of resources, commodity prices. We got another incredibly accurate long-term cycle. Commodity prices peaked in mid-2008, again in late 2011, and are going down. This cycle goes down for another 10 years into the early 2020s. Commodity prices are going to affect your export industries, which are a big part of your economy, much bigger than in the U.S. and a lot of other countries. You export a lot to China. China is slowing down because its exports, its huge manufacturing machine is slowing down, not just because of slow growth in Europe and 2% measly growth in the U.S. and zero growth in Japan for the last 2 decades. Emerging countries are slowing the fastest now because they're exporters of resources like you. And falling resource prices are hurting their best industries, hurting their best jobs, and that means they import less from China. China has moved in the last decade, 250 million people, the greatest movement from rural to urban areas. These are low-skilled people in high-rises that are not even legal citizens of their cities. They're only legal back in their rural areas they came from. They're going to run back. People don't know in the United States, our illegal Mexican immigrants have been moving back to Mexico faster than new immigrants have been coming in recent years in the downturn. China has the most overvalued real estate in the world, 3 times as overvalued as Australia, and the United States at the top and other countries, more than any other emerging countries. Their leading cities are about 30 times income. It's just, I've never seen a bubble like this. Again, I have studied, I am an expert in demographics, and I'm going to talk about that a lot, but I have also studied bubbles, all types of bubbles throughout history. I know a bubble when I see one. I have never seen a bubble like this. This is government driven to extremes never seen before. Forced urbanization, forced exports, pegging of currency, everything to put your economy on steroids. Well, the government started to try to pull in this real estate bubble in China, but now the private sector, the shadow banking sector, the same thing that tanked the United States economy and incredibly crazy lending, is taking over in China, and the government's losing control of this. I see China's bubble bursting next year, and I see a major world crisis. One of the good things I'm going to say this time, I'm going to be very specific. I expect this stock markets around the world to top generally in the first quarter of 2014, likely by early to mid-January or shortly thereafter. I expect this crisis to build and this crash to build into the second and third quarters, and I've got a lot of reasons behind that. If we don't see a major crisis by then you can get back investing. But I'm telling you, real estate has very little upside potential, even by the admittance of people who are real estate advocates in your country. And I say you got 30 to 50% downside in real estate. Get real about real estate. Get real about the global downturn. If it weren't for these global factors, and it weren't for the bubble in China and the downturn in resource prices and commodities, you wouldn't have much of a problem. Your demographics are the best in the world for demographics. They just go sideways for a while and actually go up again. There's almost no country, only the Scandinavian countries are close to you. But most other developed countries, and especially Southern Europe and Central Europe, including Germany and Switzerland and Austria, these countries are going to go off a demographic cliff so steep, people aren't going to believe it when it happened. They're the next Japan coming. And South Korea follows Japan. So we're going to look around the world at demographics, look at the impacts on Australia. Most important, I'm going to give you solid strategies in investing and in your business to profit and thrive from this great deflation ahead, while most people get blindsided just like last time. So make sure you come out. I'd love to meet you. I'm going to be there in February. And again, come to Secure the Future. You will not regret it. Thanks for listening.